Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing the Feiyutech a1000. I just want to start by saying in 2018, I expect pretty much all gimbals on the market to give you nice, smooth video, to have good algorithms and strong motors. I know that's not always the case, but that was kind of my expectation going in. I do want to start with the best features of the Feiyutech a1000 and what ultimately led me to picking this gimbal. So in my research, this seemed to be the only gimbal that had an offset roll motor so that you can actually see the screen on your camera. I know that the DJI Ronin S also advertises this, and you can currently pre-order that, but this was the only one at the time that was on the market that offered that. That was a huge plus to me, so that I could see my screen when I was holding the gimbal up, so that was a big plus for this. Also, the other thing was the price. On Amazon, this was $319. That was the best price for a 3-axis gimbal in this weight class that could hold up 1.7 kilograms or 3.7 pounds. Everything else was in the $400 to $500 range. So this was much cheaper. That definitely caught my attention. Had the offset roll axis motor. So those two things alone really played into why I chose this gimbal. Some other smaller things, this gimbal comes with a small tripod so that if you're using the gimbal, you can actually collapse it down and use it as a handle, or you can open it up and set it down for like a time lapse or something like that. So that was another plus. I know they're not very expensive, but it has the Q20 on the bottom and it came with a small tripod. The other thing that they advertise is their time-lapse feature, and that's something I really love, time lapses, and that's something that I was really looking for in a gimbal. They advertised that they had a time-lapse feature, as well as that there was built-in control for Sony cameras. I use a Sony a6500. It was listed, so that really also drew me in as well. Once I got the gimbal in, I took it on a 2-week trip to Europe. I didn't bring the case, I just threw it in my backpack, and then I'm gonna give you some of the best and some of the worst things in that experience that I had in those 2 weeks. One of the best things right off the bat is the ability to balance this gimbal. You don't need any tools, it's all thumb screws. I got it balanced really in under a minute. If you kind of know what you're doing, it's very easy. I've had experience with gimbals in the past, but even if you just take 15 minutes to figure it out the first time, from that point on, it'll be so much easier. Also, throwing it in my bag without the case, it was only unbalanced probably a handful of times and pulling it out of my bag. I used it almost every day and it was only unbalanced just a few times. I did get incredible battery life. Another big plus about this gimbal is that it comes with 2 sets of rechargeable batteries. So you can have one set in and one ready to go in case those die. Like I said, on the trip, I shot every day, not for the entire day, but I did, do clips here and there. So I'd say it got pretty heavy use, and only one day did I have to swap the batteries out, which that was pretty impressive to me. And I'm not even sure that it was because of the use of me actually using the gimbal. I think the gimbal accidentally got turned on in my bag, and that might be why the batteries die, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But just full disclosure, it did die on me one day. I swapped the batteries out and I was good to go. The motors on this seem very strong. I've got this set up with a pretty long lens as well as a mic on top. Like I said, it can handle 3.7 pounds. My setup is about 2 pounds, so I should have a good bit of play in there, and the motors should be really rock solid on my setup, which they were. I've touched on this, but another big thing was the time-lapse ability. You can use it with the app just to kind of set your parameters, and then you don't even need the app to actually start your time-lapse. You can strictly use the button on the back. You tap it 4 times, move the gimbal to where you want it to start, press once, move the gimbal where you want it to end, press again, and then it'll go back to that start position. I do have to say, after the 2 weeks of using it in my bag and taking it out This is a really well-built gimbal and really well thought out as well. There's part of the arms that are actually have rubber protecting them, so if they are to hit another portion of the gimbal, depending on how you have it balanced, they won't get scratched up or clank around. I was really impressed with that. It seems that a lot of thought went into the engineering of this gimbal. So thumbs up for the design, as well as it seems very rugged. Like I said, I didn't have a case, used it for 2 weeks in my bag, and it held up just fine. So I've told you some of the best features of the Feiyutech A1000. Now let me tell you some of the worst things about the Feiyutech A1000. At the price point, I will start this off by saying it outperformed my wildest expectations. At $319, the thing was a beast. My complaints are pretty nitpicky, and they're only there because I've seen some higher end stuff. But the app, I think, is pretty bad when it comes to the time-lapse. I was very disappointed in that. The app is great as far as like setting your parameters. It even has a remote control feature. That stuff worked fine. The time-lapse is the one thing that was really big to me. I understand if you're buying a gimbal, you're probably buying it for video, not really for time-lapse. I like to do time lapses, and using this gimbal is a really affordable way to do a motion lapse. So I was really excited about that. You have to set the panning and the tilting parameters individually in a turns per hour, or I guess turns per minute, something like that. And you have to set one individually. So you can't just set a starting point and an ending point and say, hey, traverse that span over X number of time. What you have to do is you set your starting point and your ending point, and then individually your tilt and your pan and your tilt are going to move at the speeds that are specified in the app. That just is pretty horrible to me. If they could fix that, this thing would just be unbelievable. So I was setting my pan to, I think, 1 turn per hour, and I was setting my tilt to 1 turn every 4 hours to get a nice, because I wasn't moving my tilt very much, but I was moving my pan a lot. And what will happen is you set your start point and your end point, and the gimbal will run the time lapse until the last parameter runs out. So if it's the pan that's gonna take the longest, or the tilt, it's really hard to get them right. Actually, I didn't get it right ever. So if I set my pan, let's say 1/4 of a turn, and then I set my tilt to maybe like 1/8 of a turn. Well, if I had my pan set to 1 hour and my tilt set to 4, then it would, let's say it finished the pan first, and then it would finish the tilt. It just, not a good setup. They definitely could improve upon that, and I got really spoiled. I've used DJI's Osmo Mobile, and their time-lapse features incredibly easy. I'm really interested to see if the Ronin S also has that ability as well, because that will really intrigue me to pick one of those up to test it out, because I really like the time-lapse ability. The other thing that I was disappointed about, it also pertains to the time-lapse, is that there's no like nighttime feature. So if you wanted to do like a longer exposure time-lapse, I didn't find anything in the app that would actually let you pause while it's taking that photo. Because if you're doing an exposure that's a few seconds long, you don't want any movement during that time. So at this time, with the app and with the gimbal, I wasn't able to get it to pause during photos. It would just take the photos as the gimbal was moving. Another negative that I found is that the mounting plate, even if you have the hand screw tightened down as tight as I could get it, it can still move sometimes. I know that's a small issue. You could also do some modifications, like maybe get some sandpaper and rough it up a little bit. That might help. I didn't want to do that in case I wanted to return this gimbal. If I decide to keep it long term, that's probably something that I would do. It seems to be a pretty easy fix, but it would throw you out of balance if it slid around. And then lastly, there was some drift when I had the gimbal locked. So I wanted to do what you call a hyperlapse. So I had the gimbal locked and I was walking with it, shooting some video, hoping to speed it up later. And I noticed that my pan axis was actually drifting as I was walking. This happened almost every time I did it. What's interesting is if I didn't have the pan axis locked so that it was in follow mode, there was no drift when I was walking. But when I locked it down, there would be some drift. to the right-hand side. It was very strange. I have to say, I highly recommend the Feiyutech a1000. For the price and what you're getting, it really is awesome. They did an awesome job. It's well thought out, works very well. My biggest knock against it is the time-lapse stuff. I really enjoy time lapses. That's something that's a big deal to me. So I was very disappointed in the app, and it's probably gonna be the reason that I ultimately end up getting a different gimbal and not sticking with this one, just because I like shooting time lapses. I hope this review of the Feiyutech a1000 was helpful in helping you decide if you want to pick it up or if you're going to keep shopping. I really do recommend this. I think it's an awesome gimbal for the price. Does a great job smoothing out video. Just be wary of the time lapse feature. Thanks so much for watching Break It Yourself, and we'll see you next time.